Well, I will just go ahead and kick us off. We have an exciting panel joining us this late afternoon to present and discuss research that explores the interplay between algorithmic decision-making, firm incentives, and consumer welfare across digital markets. Our presenters and discussants will explore topics such as tacit collusion among AI algorithms and advertising actions, the short and long-term economic trade-offs of polarizing news content, the transparency paradox, and the intended and unintended consequences of privacy protection in social media, and advertising attention elasticities, and calculating consumer welfare in multi-sided markets. I'm Jillian Joseph. I'm an antitrust litigation partner at Mayer Brown here in Los Angeles. And I have with me here Dr. Juliet Caminad, who will be our session discussant. Dr. Caminad is a principal with the analysis group in San Francisco. She received her PhD in economics from the University of Chicago and her master's in economics from the Paris School of Economics. Dr. Caminad is a renowned scholar. She specializes in the economic analysis of competition and platform issues in the United States and EU, and has written numerous reports and testified multiple times as an expert witness in antitrust matters, including on behalf of all sides of the V, plaintiffs, defendants, and agencies. So I will go ahead and turn it over to our first presenter, Dr. KARANAM, to present his paper. Dr. KARANAM is an assistant professor in the area of information systems at the Jindal School of Management at UT Dallas. He received his PhD and master's in economics from UT Austin and his master's of science in information systems from the Birla Institute of Technology and Science in Pune, India. He conducts his research in the multidisciplinary domain of digital economy and is particularly interested in the economic impacts and underlying mechanisms of mobile app design, platform governance, the networked economy, and use-inspired AI or machine learning algorithms.
Thank you, Jillian, for the introduction. Thank you also for the organizers, Danny and Jennifer, for including my paper into the conference. So this is a joint work with Ashish Agarwal and Anitish Barua at UT Austin. In this paper, we try to understand whether self-learning algorithms, specifically deep Q learning algorithms, identify collusive strategies without any explicit communication in the context of display advertisement markets that use first price auctions. So let me start off by setting up the stage. With the increase in popularity of, or with the increase in adoption of mobile devices and popularity of image and video content, a large volume of user attention became widely available in the form of their visits to social media and mobile apps. This phenomenon has led to the widespread use of display advertisement that features images and short-form videos. In fact, the spending on online display advertisement was around $300 billion in 2025. These advertisements are sold and distributed through real-time bidding auctions on an ad exchange. These auctions can be either first price or second price auctions. However, in the recent times, to help the buyers ease the process of conducting these auctions or participating in these auctions, majority of ad exchanges, including Google, have moved towards first price auctions. In addition, to address the call for transparency, majority of these ad exchanges also provide information on the minimum bidding bid required to win in all the auctions that these advertisers have participated. So these auctions are generally conducted whenever a user refreshes a web page or interacts with the mobile app. With billions of active mobile and internet users, these auctions are conducted in a matter of milliseconds. So given the speed, majority of advertisers rely on programmatic or algorithmic bidding to participate in these auctions. In fact, in 2024, more than 90% of display advertisements are being traded through programmatic bidding. Now, these algorithms does provide substantial benefits in terms of their speed and also efficiently match the demand with the supply. However, there are growing concerns that these algorithms can coordinate in unprecedented ways to produce cartel-like outcomes. So algorithms can facilitate collusion broadly in two ways. One, humans make an agreement to form collusion, and then they use algorithms or software to implement it. For example, software can be programmed with specific rules that can identify the deviations from the agreement and retaliate by lowering or matching the bid. Right? So this is called as explicit collusion, and it is considered as unlawful across the globe. There is Sherman Act in US and a similar act in EU and so on. Alternately, with the advancements in AI and the increased transparency of markets, self-learning algorithms can identify profit maximizing bids that can lead to collusion without any knowledge of humans. This form of collusion is known as tacit collusion. While there is no consensus regarding the legality of this type of collusion, policymakers are concerned about this issue, given the way the AI is progressing and the big data, which can make this a highly plausible and pervasive problem. We try to inform this policy discussion in our study by specifically examining the display advertisement markets using first price auctions based on simulation experiments. So specifically, we ask, what is the bidding behavior of budget-constrained deep Q learning algorithms? And in the context of first price auctions, and how does this behavior change with the availability of information on the auction process for these algorithms? So our research is related to a rich growing set of studies that examine the impact of AI on various marketplaces, such as AI algorithms, or in the context of dynamic pricing and the use of AI in auctions and so on. Our research is closest to the study by Bancho and his co-author, who examined simple Q learning algorithms, but with infinite budget, which is unrealistic. And they also show that there is a collusion. The collusion is mitigated when they provide information on the winning bid for these algorithms. Hence, it is unclear whether budget-constrained deep Q learning algorithms would form collusion, and we try to address this question in our study. So specifically, we use this following this simulation setup, wherein we allow a reinforcement learning agent to participate in an economic environment. So the agent receives, based on the current state and the previous reward, the agent places a bid. The economic environment takes this bid and provides a new reward, and also moves the agent to an updated state. So I will explain both the economic environment and the reinforcement learning agent in more detail in the coming slides. So what we designed the economic environment to simulate a display advertisement market that uses first price auctions. So this is a single item auction with 2 or 3 bidders. Only the highest bidder wins the auction and also obtains the slot. So all of these players have a similar value, same value for this auction. So these are symmetric bidders, and their value remains constant over time. Further, we only allow them to bid less than their value, which is considered as 1. So they can bid from 0 to 1. And we also discretize this bid space into 19 equal intervals of size 0.05. So the algorithm can take actions in any of these 19 actions, or these are the bids that the bidder can bid in our setup. In addition, the bidders are given limited budget for a specific period of time, which is similar to the advertising marketing budgets in the marketing campaign. Specifically, in our context, we provide $5 across 50 rounds. So this budget is private to the bidders. That is, they only know their own remaining budget and the amount of time that is remaining to get it replenished. Right? Further, bidders are not allowed to participate if their budget gets exhausted or if they bid higher than their budget. So more precisely, so each firm, based on the limitations of its budget, using its algorithms, places a bid. The highest bidder is considered as the winner. The winner pays the bid, obtains a payoff of value minus bid, and the loser gets a payoff of 0. And finally, their budget also gets updated. Right. So this is a finite repeated games, right, with 50 rounds and a limited budget for this all 50 rounds. So the computation of subgame perfect equilibrium in this context with backward induction is hard or infeasible, and it is also unclear if there is a unique equilibrium in this context. Hence, we derive our baseline or competitive benchmark using a stationary and symmetric context. Specifically, if in the one shot first price auction with symmetric bidders and budget constraints, The equilibrium is given as the minimum of the optimal bid and the budget. So the optimal bid in the first price auction without any budget constraint is n minus 1 by n times the value, where n is the number of players, which is 0.5. However, we provide a budget of $5 across 50 rounds, considering a stationary scenario where bidders spend same amount of money across rounds. They have an average budget of $0.1 per round, which is much lower than the optimal bid, that is 0.5. However, if the bidders bid the value of 0.1 and 0.1, they would end up leaving some budget on the table. Hence, they would raise their bids and end up bidding 0.2 and 0.3. In addition, it is also been noted in the literature that with the availability of information, bidders raise their bid. Hence, we consider our baseline based on the no information case, which is 0.2 for 2 bidders and 0.3 for 3 bidders. So if the algorithms converge to a bid lower than this baseline and also in equal number of times, then we consider it as a collusion in our study. So we designed the reinforcement learning agent in the following way. So 2 algorithms make a bid, B1 and B2, and then receive a payoff. Now that they have experienced this payoff, they would update their knowledge on these chosen bids using the following Q network, which is given by this equation. So here A is the action, which represents the 19 bits that it can place, and S is the state, which includes the amount of remaining budget and the time for the budget to get replenished. And delta is the discount factor, which represents the forward-looking nature of the algorithm. That is, if the value of delta is low, it prioritizes winning in the immediate rounds rather than winning in the later rounds. Right. So once this value, the Q network is updated in the next round, the algorithm places bid based on using this updated Q network based on this epsilon greedy strategy. That is, it places a bid that maximizes the Q network with the probability of 1 minus epsilon and a random bid with the value of epsilon. So the epsilon here represents the exploration and exploitation strategy of the Q learning algorithm. Further, we allow the epsilon to decay over time. That is, there is a lot of exploration in the initial rounds and a lot of exploitation in the later rounds. So we allow this reinforcement learning agent to participate in 3 economic scenarios with varying degrees of information on the auction process. That is, there is no information in the initial case, and then there is partial information where we provide the information on the average bids of the competitors, and then a full information case. We call it a full information case wherein we provide information on the actual bid that is required to win. All right, so each scenario is conducted for 10 simulations. Each simulation consists of 1 million rounds. We look at the last 50,000 rounds and examine the convergence in those last 50,000 rounds to consider whether there's a collusion or not. Right. So these are the results in the no information case. We observe that both in the case of 2 and 3 bidder auctions, algorithms converge to a price that is lower than the competitive benchmark, and also in almost an equal percentage of time. Hence, we consider that the deep Q learning algorithms that have budget constraints also lead to a collusive outcome without any explicit communication. So there is a tacit collusion that is happening. In addition, with more access to information, they have better understanding of the auction process, and so they would start coordinating at much lower prices. That is, with access to information, the average bids that algorithms converge to is lower and lower. All right, so the collusion gets worsened with the access to information. And now the question is, how are these collusive prices sustained? One plausible reason could be the reward and punishment strategies that are adopted by these algorithms during the training process. That is, if the competitor raises the bid, I would punish the competitor by raising the bid much higher. However, if the competitor lowers the bid, I would reward the competitor by lowering my bid as well. So to understand this behavior, we use the following model where we examine the bid in the current time period of an algorithm I and its relation to the competitor's bids in the previous time period and also to its own bid in the previous time period. Right? So these are the results. We find that with more access to information, the value of the magnitude of beta 2 and beta 3 increase with access to information. So algorithms react more aggressively to the competitors. Further, we also observe that the value of beta 1 also increases with access to information. Hence, the strategy, the reward and punishment strategy, is persisted longer with access to information. That is, they punish more aggressively and also, persist that strategy for a longer period of time, which kind of leads to more aggressive collusion. Right. So this is one of the first studies to examine budget-constrained deep Q learning algorithms. And we also note that the additional information that is provided to algorithms can lead to can worsen the collusion. And these results call for revisiting the auction design to form competitive bidding. One thing that I have not discussed in the slides is that what we see is that collusion is need not be negative for consumer welfare in our context. In this case, collusion reduces advertisement costs, which can increase product quality or consumer welfare in the context of advertisements. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you so much. And we have here to discuss with us Professor Matthijs WILDENBEEST from the Eller College of Management, University of Arizona. Dr. WILDENBEEST is a professor of economics at the University of Arizona and a CEPR fellow. He currently serves as an associate editor at the International Journal of Industrial Organization. He earned his PhD in economics from Erasmus University, Rotterdam, his Master of Philosophy in Economics from Tinbergen Institute, and his Master of Science in Economics from Erasmus University, Rotterdam. He's an expert in the areas of industrial organization, applied microeconomics, and applied econometrics, and his research focuses on consumer search behavior, platform design, pricing algorithms, and pricing in vertical markets.
Okay, thank you for this very kind introduction, and thanks for having me here. It's a great pleasure to read this paper and it's a very interesting paper. So the main focus of the paper is on advertising auctions becoming more important. Because everything is moving online, just like advertising. So basically, what the paper does is it builds on Bankyo and Scriptpatch. So they have shown that Q learning may lead to collusion in a first price auction setting. But they also find that auctions become more competitive if more information is provided. Right, and this is an important finding because the advertising platform, they design the auction, right? So if they lose money because there's collusion going on, they have a big incentive to do something about it, right? And in this case, by providing more information on the winning bid, they can do something about it. So that's where this paper comes in, right? It finds that with budget constraints and deep Q learning, collusion also arises, just like in the Bankyo setting. But, and this is important, collusion persists when more information is provided, right? So if you give information on the winning bid or the average bid, collusion does not go away. So this could make it more difficult for the platform to intervene. So overall, it's a very nice paper, I think. It's an important finding that in a more realistic setting, so with constraints and more advanced algorithms, providing more information doesn't really help in getting rid of collusion. And again, the role of the platform here is important. They play a crucial role to do something about it, and it's in their interest. So what I like about the paper is it dives into the mechanism, right? So it tries to figure out exactly why additional information does not mitigate collusion. The paper is still very preliminary, but already there are quite a number of important robustness checks included. So first comment is about the theoretical framework. So the setting kind of differs a little bit from what is the textbook first price auction model. In particular, it assumes that everyone has the same valuation of $1. While in the textbook model, these valuations are typically drawn from a distribution, let's say uniform distribution. Same thing with budgets, right? So they are fixed to some number. Of course, they may change over time depending on how the bidding goes. But it's the same for everyone, right? And this has a pretty large impact on the optimal bidding strategies. For instance, you don't get bid shading. The optimal bid is to bid your valuation, right? Because there's no uncertainty about the valuations of the other players. And I mean, this is fine. And this basically follows Bankyo and Scriptpatch. So the reason why they do it that way is because they make a comparison with second price auctions. So I think here it's important that you make the case for why you do it this way. And I think, I mean, you lose some of the interesting kind of features of a first price auction, which is this uncertainty about what how the other bidders value the auction, right? And also correlation between valuations and budgets is basically assumed away. So I think it will be interesting to look maybe for a process check, look at a setting that's kind of more in line with the standard model, have a valuation and a budget distribution that is uniform between 0 and 1. I think that would be a simple extension. Although we already briefly discussed it yesterday, and doing Q learning simulation is already kind of pretty demanding. So so the question whether it's actually feasible remains to be seen. But I think it's definitely worth exploring this further. Yeah. So the second comment is about separating the role of deep Q learning and budget constraints. So right now both are added at the same time, and I think it will be interesting to kind of try to separate the two. Just to figure out which one is more important for this main finding that adding more information doesn't really do anything to inclusive behavior. This would be something relatively straightforward. I would suggest starting for a simple Q learning model and then add budget constraints to that and see what happens. Right, and then role of the advertising platform. Already mentioned this a few times. I think that's kind of really important here. And I mean, this paper focused on one way in which the platform can intervene, which is by providing more information about the average bid or the winning bid. But of course, I mean, there are other ways you can intervene, right? You can provide even more information, right? You can provide information on the entire bid distribution, which doesn't make much sense if you have 2 bidders, but if you have more than 2 bidders, 3 bidders, then this is extra information. Also, nowadays, a lot of the platforms, let's say Google, right? They provide their algorithmic tools themselves, right? So Google has Google Smart Bidding. So they actually do the algorithmic bidding for the bidders, right? For the firms, right? And of course, this also adds an interesting dimension to all this, right? Because, supposedly the platform wants to make sure that it's generating revenue, right? So it wants to make it. It certainly doesn't want to collude, right? So, and I think this would be something that's relatively easy to incorporate into your simulations. Instead of having a bidder that is purely interested in its own revenue or profits, you could kind of make it a function of the profits of the platform as well. Just put some weight on that. And I think that would be an interesting extension to see what happens in that case. And, I have a bunch of other comments, but I'm probably out of time, so we can talk about those later. But again, I think this is a really interesting question, and very much enjoyed reading it, and looking forward to seeing future versions. Thank you.
And I will welcome our second presenter, Dr. Shunyao Yan from the Leavey School of Business in Santa Clara. Dr. Yan is Assistant Professor of Marketing at Santa Clara University. She received her MS degree and PhD from the Graduate School of Economics, Finance, and Management at Goethe University in Frankfurt, Germany, and her BS from Nanjing University in China. Dr. Yan's substantive research interests include content monetization strategies, digital advertising, and ad.
All right. Thanks so much, everyone, for staying to the session. I'll make myself be mindful of time. Thank you, Danny and Jennifer, for organizing this. Thank you, DK, for discussing our paper. So this is empirical work. We try to quantify the trade-off that publishers are facing while publishing polarizing news content on their advertising revenue versus subscription revenue. And it's being motivated by the fact that digital publishers, motivated by maximizing engagement to get click-through, to get advertising revenue, publish a lot of provocative content, to the extent that last year, Oxford published the word of the year was rage-bait, essentially saying that we're all around this clickbaiting area. Of course, scholars like us and also regulators care about what does it do to consumer welfare, does it harm customers' mental health, so on and so forth. So starting from US, we start to have state laws regulating this provocative content, algorithms that amplify this provocative content on kids and minors. And then EU, they say, okay, it's not just a potential harm on children, it's a potential harm on general consumers. So that we're trying to see whether there's actual damage, even on the publisher's revenue side, when you're publishing a lot of polarizing content. So that we collaborate with the news media, where the trade-off of advertising revenue that's based on engagement versus subscription revenue that's based on trust is particularly salient. And we collaborate with the premium European publisher who wish to stay anonymous, but you can think of it like FT or New York Times in terms of its brands, in terms of its reputation, publishing daily news online. And around 80% of its traffic is generated locally inside its country, but it's also serving 20% of the general international audience. And it's standard advertising plus subscription revenue, subscription from a metered paywall, very much like New York Times paywall. And the average monthly subscription rate is around 30 euros per month. And the particular type of rage-baiting content we focus on are polarizing content, in the sense that there is an affective component in that. Affective polarization refers to how much Republicans hate Democrats, and so forth, so that there could be a lot of effective polarizing content, increasing the rage, the outrages between groups. And then there's also an ideological polarizing aspect that's being shown in some social media study, really good in terms of generating engagement. Even when Democrats are debating with Republicans, that increase a lot of engagement. So platforms potentially like that a lot. And we think a little bit more carefully on the ideological polarization side, because polarization is a really multidimensional thing, at least in a lot of European countries, so that we even classify it into economic polarizing, globally polarizing, and also environmentally polarizing. And then we try to measure this polarizing content using two ways. The first way is large language model rated affective and ideological polarization. There's some recent paper in Marketing Science and also top Polarizing journal showing large language model is really efficient and accurate when it's trying to judge how polarizing a content is. It's a lot more cost efficient than have human raters, so that we go down that way. We tried a lot of techniques to try to make the results stable. We tried to save temperature to 0. We tried to control the reasoning path of the model by giving it really detailed rubric. What does least polarizing means? What does most polarizing means? So on and so forth. But we also tried some more traditional ways that's based on parliamentary debate, congressional records, how left-leaning party, left-leaning politicians and right-leaning politicians are debating with each other, so that we train a herd model that based on the congressional speech to predict whether news articles are polarizing, if so, to the left or right. That's a rather well-established method in econ and also business. So that we have those two very different sources of measure of polarizing, how polarizing a news content is, and we hope that we can find some consistent result. If not, that would be interesting too. Then identification, a huge challenge here is that consumers, they self-select into reading more or less polarizing news content. We ended up not choosing an experiment method because when we're starting the project, there's a paper coming out say that all those experiments try to randomize our news sources, randomize Republicans to read some New York Times, for instance, right after the experiment, while the consumers, the participants immediately switch back to their news sources, so that we decide to rely on some real world variations. So we find two instrument variable. One is coming purely from the supply side. It's called a Bartik IV, I'll introduce in a second. The other is coming from a major political event happening within our observation period. That's a federal election going right in the middle of our observation period, increasing the political salience of our news feeder spot. So Bartek IV is essentially a shift share IV. The intuition is super simple. It's saying that there are some idiosyncratic components in our day-to-day news realization. Today, waking up, maybe some politicians decide to tweet something super polarizing, and that's random. And then newspapers, they would be publishing it. It's not responding to any consumer's demand on polarizing content. So essentially, we're elaborating whether this idiosyncratic exogenous variation in terms of polarizing content can give some exogenous variation in consumers' news diet in terms of suddenly their news feeds are becoming more polarizing versus not. Well, the second IV is this election IV, which leveraged the fact that our news publisher, it's targeting the international audience, especially there's a neighboring country that's right next to our focal country that's not going through a federal election at all. During the election period, we found that our local consumers suddenly start to consume a lot more political news, polarizing news about the neighboring country, and the rest of the world is simply not. So that's an election IV, which is in a difference in difference kind of format that we hope to generate some exogenous variation. So first, we find that these two IVs, the Bartek IV and also election IV, is generating positive effect on consumer consumption of polarizing news in both effective polarizing news and ideological polarizing news. So that's essentially a relevance of our instrument variable. And then exclusion restriction is super difficult to convince. However, we try our best. We did a lot of tests. For instance, for the difference in differences setup of election IV, we test for a parallel pretreatment trend. We also make sure that there's no effect coming from non-political, non-polarizing content so that our indulgence variable do not directly impact our outcome. And then for the Bartek IV, we did even more. But most importantly, I just want to highlight that these publishers, they still have this agenda setting in mind. They're really reputable so that they do not do things like simply responding to customers' interests in topic A so that they start to publish a lot of topic A. We also test that empirically, and we find the supply of news is not responding to the lack demand of our news consumers. And if you believe in any of these two IVs, here are the main findings of the paper. First, on the effective polarizing side, what we find is that this effective polarizing news, those provocative ones, really emotional ones that has a dividing tone, they're really good at increasing the engagement, which we measure using the total second you spend on the news media. However, when you're looking at user subscription intention in the exact same week, if a user is exogenously consuming more effective polarizing news, suddenly the positive effect on subscription is gone. And especially during the election period, the effect even turns into a negative sign, meaning that there's a negative relationship from effective polarizing news on subscription, especially during election. And we find very similar pattern when we move to ideological polarization using both the BERT method trained from congressional speech and also the large language model based measure. We find that for all dimensions of ideological polarization, except from the left-leaning environment polarizing news articles, they all increase users' time span on the news media. However, when we're looking at the subscription side, the effect is immediately gone, especially if we zoom into the election period, the effect even turned negative. So that's the effect that we find is rather robust. So that we wonder why this is happening. Well, there's very well-known phenomenon in this media consumption literature called confirmation bias. Essentially, it's saying, okay, in terms of the polarizing content, especially if you're interacting with a polarizing content not in line with your prior belief, then you are probably pissed off so that you're less likely to stay with news media. So that we try to proxy for this user's prior political belief using two ways. First, there's some really good research showing that we like to live in the area where our neighbors share the similar political beliefs, so that we try to use users' geographic location, their zip code, the voting share of our federal election to proxy for their prior political belief. And then we also try to assess users' baseline as prior election news consumption, in the sense that if you consume more left-leaning news, then probably your prior political belief is more towards left than right. And using both of these two measures on users' prior political belief, we found that, well, if you're reading politically, ideologically aligning news articles, for instance, if you live in right-leaning zip code, and if you're reading right-leaning articles, it helps a little bit when it comes to subscription. However, it cannot turn the main effect into a positive one. So the coefficient that I'm highlighting here is that the main effect when it comes to the right-leaning polarizing articles on right-leaning users are still negative. However, the interaction effect of the zip code and also the main effect is positive in the sense that it helps a little bit in recovering the subscription revenue, but it did not turn the subscription revenue into a positive sign. All right, so that's our paper. We essentially found that the exact polarizing content, effective polarizing, and also ideological polarizing one, it's indeed really good in terms of increasing engagement, which is in line with a lot of paper that's analyzing how polarizing content is distributed along social media. It's very much in line with that dimension. However, as long as you are publishers or earning subscription revenue and you care a lot about your subscription revenue, you should really be mindful that the impact on your subscription revenue is a negative sign. We had a little back of envelope analysis inside the paper. It's basically showing that the amount that you earn from that total time spent on website is not enough to recover all the subscription revenue loss that encountered. So that's it. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion and any question that you might have.
And our discussant is Dr. D.K. Lee, the Pelley Klestrom Chair, Associate Professor of Information Systems and Computing and Data Sciences at BU. Dr. Lee received his PhD from Wharton, his master's degree in statistics from Yale, and his bachelor's in computer science from Columbia. His research examines the development, deployment, and impact of artificial intelligence in business and society, with particular emphasis on generative AI, large language models, and unstructured data. Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Thank you for having me. Firstly, thanks for having me. This was a super interesting paper because there are not many papers looking at the engagement and subscription, even though that is one of the most important questions that these newspaper they face, right? So just to give a Shunyao did a great job presenting it. Just punchline of the summary is that polarizing news content increased short-term engagement, but not really the subscription, right? And they did a lot of work dividing different analysis such that it is very actionable. For example, I really liked the divide between the analysis between effective polarization and ideological polarization. So they basically find that negative subscription effect is driven primarily by effective polarization, us versus them framing, right? A more rich result in the paper. This was a very impressive data set. It was collecting all kinds of different data set and they have a full, 1.7 million user week, 40 weeks of data, engagement, subscription, as well as user metadata, clickstream, and all the articles. So this was an impressive data set. And they did a lot of NLP as well as econometrics to arrive at this interesting results. So strength is, it's a very highly impactful question on this. The analysis actually has lots of results that could inform editorial decisions, right? Whether they should go for effective or not, ideological or not. They also did some heterogeneity analysis across, which you can read in the paper. And you can see that they spent a lot of time looking into this different complaints that reviewers might have. They do mention, so I just brainstormed some of the analysis. Of course, the authors probably thought about this too. I think churn data, if you have it, might be very interesting because you can see if exposure to certain polarizing content make them not subscribe, or cancel subscription, right? That could happen. Also, the paper combines a la carte purchases versus full digital subscription, which it's a difference in strength. You could pay for an article versus say a yearly subscription, so that's a different outcome. Just different analysis might be interesting. Also, it might be interesting to filter out or do a differential analysis on first-time user and repeat purchase users. Even though this is a very well thought out paper, I just, I like the papers so much that I just wanted to give you laundry list of reviewer nitpicking, so that you might be well prepared, right? So first one is, I think one complaint that could come out is that article quality or perception of article quality should be controlled for. Like, for example, if someone reads a polarizing content, they might associate it with low quality and then not subscribe. So if you control for that, that might be good. Okay, hold on. Yeah. So the second one is user week 0 purchase coding, which is nice, but it might push results towards a no subscription result. So what about eventual subscription? Because it's not like the person, user may read polarizing and then make a decision right away. So you can create a panel of journey data and then look at the eventual subscription in a certain period of time. So that might be there could be delays, for example, right? Another thing, it's also, I think this is more of a discussion in the paper that you can just write on. Of course, there are a lot of sites that usually rely on these very polarized crowd, right? They make money on certain top 1%, 0.1% of the readers they're willing to pay. So you might just want to clarify that we're not talking about that. Just give more background on what kind of newspaper agency you're working with, so that it's, just clarifying, delimiting, just to squelch and, preempt the reviewer concerns. Of course, it comes to exclusion restriction, it's always impossible to defend this. Reviewers will have like a zillion different ridiculous, what if scenarios. But I thought one thing that could be thought more about is country week changes due to election might be thought, argued more, because your current setup is that it only impacts the subscription through polarized articles, right? So of course the week fixed effect, might take care of things that are happening on both countries, but country week, which might not be, for example, there's an argument about the direction, but it could actually go either way because of fatigue, and also there's a prolific rise of alternative things during the election that might actually, reduce subscriptions. So it's not only one way. So I thought that. Lastly, LLM as a judge it's very hard to defend due to asking LLMs. LLMs notorious for not knowing what they know, right? Metacognitive ability is 0. So you actually want to have either human in the loop kind of approach or aggregation approach, or there's a rich literature and ideal point estimation coming from Bayesian, like David Bly's work and all of that, and evolving into Genschau's, like a bunch of political science researchers have now adopted these human in the loop aggregation method. So you might want to look into that and just straight from the CS and political science literature, leverage that and then just be done with it. Yeah, that's about it. I think this was a very, oops, I think I skipped too much. Yeah, this was a very interesting paper, and I hope to see this paper published.
Next, we'll welcome Dr. Guanyin Chen from USC Marshall School of Business. Dr. Chen is an assistant professor of marketing at the Marshall School of Business. She received her PhD in marketing at the Olin Business School, Washington University in St. Louis, her MA in economics from Tsinghua University, her BA in economics and BS in statistics from Peking University. Dr. Chen's research examines the interactions between recommender systems and social media user behavior, specifically content consumption, production, and privacy protection, using both field experiments and structural models.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction. And also, it's Guang Ying. I'm from USC Marshall. I hope you enjoyed our campus these days. And thank you so much for being here. And today it's my great pleasure to share our research. And this is a joint work with Ted Chen from WSU and also Dennis Zhang in the audience, also from WSU. And in this paper, we studied the intended and unintended consequences of privacy protection in social media. So I believe everyone here will agree with me that consumer privacy is important, given we are already here. And also especially with the development of a lot of technologies tracking and using personal data, consumers are becoming more and more concerned about their privacy. For example, according to this Pew Research Center survey in 2019, more than 70% of US adults feel less secure about their personal information than 5 years ago and express lack of control over how companies will collect and use their data, and thus want the government to have more regulation on it. And in response to that, many countries and regions have introduced legislation to protect consumer privacy, such as EU's GDPR, the California Consumer Privacy Act, and also the China Personal Information Protection Law. And beyond this regulation, companies have also started to integrate more privacy protection measures to address consumers' privacy concerns. So today, we will mainly focus on the context of social media platforms. And they are now providing more privacy protection options to allow their users to decide who can find them, who can see their content, and also how others can interact with them. However, we still don't know much about how consumers will respond to these privacy protection options. And if we take one step further, in practice, companies can actually implement privacy protection measures with different levels of strength. So on one hand, they can implement a very simple policy by simply notifying users about the personal data usage, make this information be transparent. On the other hand, they can implement a very stringent protection. We call it as mandatory protection. You can consider as the company directly shut down the certain function using the personal data and offer uniform protection for everyone. Or the companies can implement a middle range measure. Just as examples I showed you before, they can offer users a choice and let them to decide whether they want the company to use their personal data or not. And since the majority of the social media platforms that are now adopting this choice measure, this leads to our first research question. So when social media users are offered a privacy protection option, how will they respond? Will they adopt this protection? And how will this option affect their platform usage? And second, we want to ask, how will those different levels, different privacy protection measures with different levels of strength affect consumer welfare and platform profit? So to answer the first research question, we ran a large-scale field experiment on the social media platform. And to answer the second question, we estimated a structural model and use the counterfactuals to evaluate the welfare impacts of different privacy protection policies. And in order to run this experiment, we collaborated with a leading global short video social media platform, very similar to TikTok. And here for a privacy issue, we anonymize it as Platform Q. And most users access their service through its mobile app. And this platform serves more than 400 million daily active users, so very representative. And more importantly, they use a people you may know recommender algorithm to recommend a user's profile and posts to others they may know in reality based on their personal data, such as contacts and locations. And this type of PYNK recommendations have been widely adopted by almost all social media platforms, such as Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. And let me give you a quick example on how PYMP algorithm works on our platform. So say that for this platform, they want to recommend a focal user A to another user B. First, on this user B's friend page, this user A's profile will be recommended as people you may know. And also, when this user B watch videos in their feed page, this user A's posted video will also be recommended and tagged as people you may know. So this is how this platform uses PYMK algorithm to recommend a focal user A's profile and post to the other user B. And although this function was initially designed to increase user interaction and engagement, it has raised a lot of privacy concerns. The most important concern for the consumers is that they feel their personal information is being disclosed to other platform users without any explicit consent. For example, Facebook once recommended a psychiatrist patients to each other. You can see that. And also for this platform, they also receive complaints about this privacy invasion. And therefore, in order to address consumers' privacy concerns and to address these complaints, this platform Q planned to introduce a new feature in their privacy settings page of their app to allow users to disable this PYMP function. So this new feature is called recommended to people you may know. And by default, it is on, meaning that by default, everyone is recommended to others they may know, and we call it as an opt-in default state. And if users want to opt out this PYMP function, they can toggle off this slider button, then they will no longer be recommended to others they may know. But here I want to emphasize that after they opt out, although they are no longer recommended to others, others will still be recommended to this focal user. Therefore, this is solely a privacy protection for the focal user. And in order to test how consumers will respond to this new privacy protection option, the company randomly selects 12% of the registered users and assigns them with equal probability to a treatment and a control group. For the treatment users, they were able to see this new feature. But for the control users, they could not see this feature, meaning that they were neither explicitly notified the usage of the PYMP function or offered an option to disable it. As a platform manager, expects that by giving treatment users an option to protect themselves, release their privacy concerns, they should spend more time on this platform. So we then run this experiment for 22 weeks in the year of 2022, and randomly sampled around 800,000 users for our analysis and conduct our analysis at the weekly level. And we mainly focus on the app usage of the users, which is a key performance index of this platform. So here is our results. Surprisingly, contrary to the platform manager's expectation, for the treatment users, meaning those who were offered this privacy protection option, they actually decrease their app usage by around 0.8% compared with the control users. So the managers are very confused about that, but very unexpected. Therefore, in order to understand what's going on behind, we further divide these treatment users into opt-out and opt-in users. And we define opt-out users as those who disabled this PYMP function during the experiment, and opt-in users otherwise. We find only 3% of users opt out this PYMP function. I'll explain in the later stage why the rate is so low. But for now, let's first focus on how these two groups of users respond to the option. So since this opt-out decision is endogenous, to eliminate the self-selection bias, we use propensity score matching to match each opt-out and opt-in users with their control users based on their pre-experiment trees. After that, we find, compare with matched control users, opt-out users, meaning those who disable the PYMP function. Indeed, a significant increase in app usage by around 15%, just as the managers expect to have. However, at the same time, for the opt-in users, those who did not disable this function keep it on, they actually reduce their app usage by 1% compared to the control users. And based on these two responses, we propose that providing the privacy protection options have two opposing effects on users' app usage. So on one hand, there is a positive intended privacy protection effect. So meaning consumers, by disabling this P/MP function, they can alleviate their privacy concerns and thus spend more time on this platform. However, we propose that at the same time, there could also be an unintended negative consequence. This is because when offering this option, it could remind users that the platform is using their personal data and thus raise their privacy concerns and discourage the platform usage. And we call it as the negative privacy concern reminder effect. And to the best of our knowledge, we're the first paper to document these negative consequences in the context of social media. And since the majority of users remain opted in, and therefore, on average, we find that providing privacy protection option decrease average users' app usage time. So now we have answered our first question on how users respond to an option. Next, in order to evaluate the welfare impacts of different privacy protection measures, we further build a structured model to describe users' opt-out choice and app usage time. And for control users without this protection option, they only need to decide their app usage time in each week. But for the treatment users with this protection option, they need to first decide whether to opt out this P/MP function by balancing the benefit of being protected and the cost of switching from the default opt-in state to this new opt-out state. And then they will decide their app usage time. So we pretty much replicate the results in the experiments. Here, I only want to emphasize one thing. We find that actual users have a very high switching cost to disable this P/MP function. That's why the opt-out rate is so low. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. Could be consumers are not aware of this new option. Could be they have an inertia or loss aversion. Also, could be they may have find it's a hassle to navigate to that privacy settings page and opt out. And because of these reasons, the rate is so low. And based on these application results, we further evaluate the welfare impacts of 5 different counterfactual privacy protection policies. And for the interest time, I will mainly highlight the high takeaways. So benchmark we use is a no protection case, same as a control condition. We find that if we increase protection by mainly notifying users about the personal data usage, or just pair a protection option as in our experiment, it will marginally benefit consumer by increasing their surplus, but will hurt the platform by decreasing their app usage due to that negative privacy concern reminder effect. However, we find that if the platforms can use stronger privacy protection policies, actually both parties can be better off. For example, they can notify users and mandate everyone to adopt this protection, or they can notify users and also allow them to send some direct image message and let them simply click on that message to enroll into the protection. In that case, most users will adopt the protection, and thus both the consumer surplus and also the app usage can increase, leading to a win-win situation. So finally, let me quickly wrap up. Our paper finds that providing a privacy protection option unintentionally reduces social media users' app usage. And we propose that's mainly because of a negative privacy concern reminder effect. And our policy evaluation suggests that by providing stronger privacy protection policies, it could lead to a win-win situation by benefiting both consumers and the platform. So that's all I want to share today. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to this discussion and all your questions. Thank you.
We'd like to welcome Dr. Iju from the University of Minnesota Carlson School of Management. Professor Ju received his PhD in business administration from USC back in 2013, and he previously worked as a consultant at Shanghai Investment Consulting Corporation before receiving his MA in economics from UBC in Vancouver. His research interests focus on the application of industrial organization models in marketing, online auctions, consumer search, advertising, media slant, sharing economy, and Chinese economy.
For the slide right now. Yeah. But thank you for inviting me here. It's always good to go back to USC, especially right now in Minnesota. We have a lot of ice and a lot of ice. So it's great to be here. And let me have a 20-page slides. So that will be the first time you see a discussant have a long discussion than the presenter. But let me start by saying this is very impressive work. So no, that's not right. So it's so important in the sense that I did some effort to.
Sorry, come on here.
Okay, I just played by the law school rule, I guess that. So in the sense, Dennis, trust me, I told you there's 15 slides. It's there, so somewhere. Okay, so I do look online to see this very important people you may know, and I do find a movie, actually 2 movies. So one movie is a very more recent movie about this whole function. So if you study something that have a movie title in your subject, I saw you're hitting something, in my opinion. Okay, I don't have any paper like that. Okay, but on the other hand, it's very impressive work. You have a very, very cool, field experiment, large scale, with a lot of people. We're talking about close to 1 million subjects do this randomized control field experiment. That's very impressive. Okay, and also because of the authors, I think they're crazy, because in my opinion, this causality has been established. You should send out to marketing science, get published. But they said, no, we're going to focus more. We're going to do more. We're going to do a structure model to torture themselves and find out why. So because there's a big puzzle here. Because a lot of people, a lot of subjects in their model, they don't opt out. When you give the option, they don't opt out. So the question is like, why? Why don't you opt out? If I give you option, if you're concerned by privacy, shouldn't you be opt out? And they actually use this switching cost to explain that, because you may incur very high switching cost. That's the structure model. I wish Wayne has more time to spend to talk about a structure model. To me, that's a very impressive part of the paper. So very briefly, I really like this paper. I think the paper has a very nice combination of both experimental design and a structure model to provide answer to a very important question, in my opinion. So I just have, now I have to go through my memory right now. So just a few thoughts on that. Okay, this is like the main measurement they're using is app usage time. And this is a like TikTok kind of platform. I'm just was thinking about, that there's at least 2, in my own opinion. So I'm not big TikTok fans. I don't know whether you are or not. Some of you may be influencers. Okay. So I don't know, but I'm not an influencer. I don't use TikTok that much. I do watch some short-term video, but you can see there's added 2. Oh, no worries. Thank you. But there's at least 2 types of user on it's content consumers and content creators. I'm just curious, because when I was making the slide, I did check on this. According to one source, they say 6% of TikTok users are full-time content creators. I don't know whether this is true or not. 6%, the full-time content creators. There's a part-time content creator too. So the question I was thinking about, so if you think about, if I'm a content creators, be able to share my post to others can be beneficial to me, because if I care about that. So I'm just curious whether this has something to do with the platform introduce this kind of function or not. So if the data allows, I was thinking about maybe you can do something like check the quality of the post, or the post less or more, because I was thinking about, if you're content providers, you may, so see I have more followers, I will create better content, so because now I have more followers. Because in the Salesforce context, that's called the post-start problem. If I can, if in the very beginning of my first time content creators, right, if I can get a lot of people to know me as friend me so they can see my post, that will give me a lot of encouragement. That's something I was thinking about. And I don't remember, I have to take a look at my slides right now. Sorry, I have to go through, like, okay.
I wish I could talk more about structural models to talk to all you guys.
Don't torture me. All right. So another thing is, I think it's interesting because you think about this, privacy consent go both ways. They can recommend you to others. They can also recommend you to others to you. So in the experiment, they shut down on the one side, one direction. They shut down. So I'm just curious. I mean, I'm not saying they should do more experiments. That would be great if you can do more. But if I get a recommendation from people you may know, will this trigger my privacy concern as well? So there's just like something, hopefully, because in the experiment setting, right? So you shut down the option, you allow the people to shut down these options to share there to others, but they can still get a recommendation from others. So I'm just curious how these two things interact with each other. I think if you have better model data, you can maybe able to answer the question. I think it's interesting, right? So, and one thing I think the privacy concern reminder effect, as I was talking about, I think that's very cool. That's very interesting. This mechanism is inferred mainly from usage changes. There's no direct measure on that. Obviously, there's data limitation on that. I'm very sympathetic to that. I'm doing also field experiment too right now, so I understand how difficult to get the data, grain data like that. I'm just curious what they can do a little bit more add on to that. Like, for example, do small lab studies or the survey just to see how this thing works. I think that should be able to do it to provide more justification to your very key result. And, before I do the slides, I did check some social media site. Like a lot of social media still offer this kind of people you may know options like LinkedIn, even TikTok, or like even other platforms for Facebook. So you go back to me, like, is there any other benefit of doing this, right? For social media, pure social media site versus in your case, it's more like a short-term, short video platforms. So there may be some kind of generalizability things you may want to discuss about this, because maybe this result definitely holds in your case, but will this replicate to more like Facebook type website? I'm not so sure. I think this can be addressed by using more discussion to help you to hopefully go through the review process. And that's all I have. Thanks so much. I love this paper. Thank you.
Lastly, we'd like to welcome Dr. H. Tai Lam from the UCLA Anderson School of Management. Dr. Lam is an assistant professor of marketing at UCLA Anderson. He received his PhD in economics from Northwestern, his BA in economics from the University of New South Wales in Australia. His research interests include quantitative marketing and industrial organization with a focus on platforms, advertising, consumer search, and antitrust issues. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers for including this paper, and Jennifer. I'm super excited to talk about it.